Hi everybody and welcome to Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Form's weekend handicapping preview program. I'm Dan Illman. Thanks so much for watching. Here's what's coming up in this week's edition of Out of the Gate. Two major graded stakes races to discuss. The Grade 2 $1 million Charlestown Classic is your DRF Bet Saturday race of the day. We also have graded stakes action on the turf at Keeneland, the Elkhorn Stakes. The Federico Tesio Stakes at Laurel usually is a springboard for a local hopeful to try the second jewel of racing's Triple Crown, the Preakness. DRF Handicappers Mike Beer, Matt Bernier, and I will handicap those three races. Plus, we have Timeform's Best. Craig Milkowski's Pace Projector segment focuses on the Kona Gold Stakes at Santa Anita, and David Aragona spotlights one of the New York Stallion series at Aqueduct. Plus, best bets, horses to watch, and lots more. So let's break Out of the Gate. We begin out of the gate with our horse watch segment. Matt Bernier, what is this with this glad handing, this victory lap? Yes, you made a wonderful pick of Lady Apple in the Fantasy Stakes, but is this really your horse watch? You have to remember in this game, a pat on the back's only a good 6 inches away from a kick in the pants.
Yeah, no, I got to be honest with you. I've been looking for a filly to try to go against Bellafina with potentially here for the Kentucky Oaks for a little while, and I haven't found one that I really loved. But I have to be honest, this effort right here from Lady Apple, we'll take a look at the Fantasy Stakes from last weekend. I thought this was impressive because shooting down on the side, I get it. You can look at it and say, perfect trip. That's a really tight position that she's in right now. And the fact that she didn't pack it in like that, this was her first start against really quality runners going 2 turns. I thought this was a really encouraging effort. There's a part of me that looks at it and says, the 85 buyer she earned here, I think she's a little bit battle. I kind of like her going forward. I'm not going to say I'm going to pick her, but I think she's intriguing over Bellafina for the Oaks. Really professional performance over the tough luck Motion Emotion, who ran too well to lose, in my opinion, in her second consecutive race. Mike Beer, Naira analyst, you're going to Keeneland?
Yeah, Keeneland, we'll see what happens here with this another 3-year-old filly. I don't think she's got Oaks on her. It's a little too late for that, but this is Sundays at the beach for Brendan Walsh. A Medaglia d'Oro filly. They paid $300,000 for her. Her dam, a multiple Grade 1 winning Dirt Router. This is her maiden win. We're going to take a look at this last Friday. It's on a wet track. She traveled very strongly throughout this race. She's very lightly raced in her dirt debut at the end of last year. She probably could have won that race. She had a really difficult trip and was a little bit unlucky. But in this race, I mean, she just overpowers this field in the stretch, and she is going away at the end. The longer, the better for this filly, who just feels like she's just going to keep getting better with more distance. I think this is a filly to keep an eye on down the line.
Kentucky Derby points have already been assigned, and basically we know who's getting ready to run for the Roses. But I have a 3-year-old that bears watching down the road later this summer and into the fall, and his name is Warrior's Charge. He's trained by Brad Cox, and he's won his last 2 races at Oaklawn very impressively. Let's go back to his most recent race. This is how he likes to run, on the lead. And at the 3/16 pole here, the race is all but over. He powers away to win with a 97 buyer. He has won his last 2 starts by a combined 12.5 lengths, and he is headed for stakes action. Brad Cox isn't going to run him in the Preakness off a 1x win. He has his eyes set on races like the Sir Barton on the Preakness undercard, or even the Peter Pan, usually the local prep in New York for the Belmont Stakes. Whether we see this horse in the Triple Crown Series, I am uncertain, but I think Warrior's Charge has a lot of talent, and he's one to keep an eye on for the summer and fall 3-year-old races. He's really looked good in his last 2. Let's get to some handicapping. The Grade 2 $1 million Charlestown Classic is your Saturday DRF Bets Race of the Day. Let's throw up the field for the Grade 2 $1 million Charlestown Classic. Race number 11 at Charlestown on a stakes-laden Saturday card. They're going 1 1/8 miles, 3 turns around the bull ring-like configuration at Charlestown for expanded stakes previews of many of the major races across North America this weekend. Visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Mike, we've got the 1-2 finishers from last year's Charlestown Classic in here. That's Something Awesome and War Story, but I want to focus on War Story. He is the morning line favorite, and he has run some big races in the past, coming off the layoff now for Jorge Navarro.
Yeah, we'll see how he does off the layoff, but you're right, he's got plenty of races on the go-back that make him really tough in this spot, including his effort in this race last year where I thought he ran great. We're going to look at a replay of his from last September at Parks. This is going 1.5 miles in the Greenwood Cup. It's another solid performance from this horse. He's right there fighting for it in the stretch, and you're going to see him come out just short at the end. Now, he's a heavy favorite in this race, so you don't want to give him too many excuses, but he ran well in this race again. If he's ready off the layoff, he's going to try and get his first Charlestown Classic. Missed by a half length in this race in 2017, missed by a neck last year. He's going to try and get there first this time.
This is going to be his first start of 2019. Conversely, Matt, your top selection in this race is wheeling back on only 2 weeks' notice after a really good performance at giant odds in the big cap.
Yeah, and he's getting major class relief. I just kind of look at it and say if Mongolian Groom can run back to that big cap effort, he earned a 97 buyer, a 124 time form US rating, and he did that against the likes of Giftbox and McKinsey. We can take a look at that replay right now. I feel like if he runs back to that race, I think that's just better than what anyone else is capable of. Now, maybe he can, maybe he can't take to this 3-turn configuration, 1 1/8, the bull ring. Some horses do, some horses don't. But I thought this was a promising enough effort. It's a little bit concerning to hear the trainer say he didn't really travel all that well as far as the flight over. It took him a little while to get into his rhythm, but it seems like he's okay now. But he's 6-1 on the morning line, and I really believe if he runs back to that race, I think that's just better than what anybody else is capable of right now.
Mike Warstory is coming off of a layoff. So too is Rally Cry. And trainer Todd Pletcher has had success in this race in the past, and he has had a lot of success with horses coming off 6-month layoffs or greater.
Yeah, Pletcher's great with layoffs like this, especially with dirt routers. We'll see what happens with Rally Cry. I mean, there are a lot of questions surrounding him. He's 6 years old now. He's only raced 14 times, and that includes only 2 starts all of last year. He's off the layoff here. We're going to show a replay of his most recent start. This is his final start, and only his second start last year as a 5-year-old. Listen, I thought this was a step in the right direction. His first start off the layoff last year was not a good performance, but it felt like he was prepping with bar shoes on. Bar shoes were off here for the Grade 1 Woodward. He can't get by to the lead in the stretch. He will get out-finished by a couple of deep closers late, but this was a good performance, and I just really like his running style for this race, Dan. I mean, he's got speed, but he doesn't need the lead. I think he'll be up close all the way. I think his best race gives him a big chance in this race.
I agree with Mike on this one with all the points that he made about Rally Cry. Just a shame that Todd couldn't get him sound last year. The long layoff, the sprint return with the bar shoes. It was a lot to ask, second off that lengthy layoff in the Woodward. And the horse that he was pressing, the Elfric, was just in raging form at that time. He could never get by that horse, but it was all in all a good effort. And as Mike says, I like his tactical speed. I think he could be sitting 3rd or 4th when the real racing begins. Give me Rally Cry in the Charlestown Classic. We'll go to Craig Milkowski from Timeform US. He's going to take a look at a curious pace play in the Kona Gold Stakes at Santa Anita.
Hi, this is Craig Milkowski for this week's edition of Out of the Gate. In today's Timeform US Pace Projector segment, I'm going to take a look at the Grade 2 Kona Gold Stakes, a 6.5 furlong dirt race being run for older males at Santa Anita as the 5th race on Saturday. On the preview page, you can see the pace projector in the upper right-hand corner. The blue box indicates that there's not a lot of speed in the race. I'm going to take a closer look at that here on the preview page just by looking at the running styles of the horses entered. You can see we don't have any of our usual leaders or speed horses, and just a couple trackers, as I'm going to get to in a minute. There's quite a difference between those. As you can see, the big gap the 2 holds over the 3. Sistron over All Out Blitz. But their other running styles are all closer, mid-pack, and it really looks like Sistron's going to have an advantage. But there are some question marks. So let's take a look at the horses in morning line order. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on All Out Blitz or Zatter. Both look too slow to really be contenders in here. They don't have a lot of early speed. So if either of them were to happen to win, it would be a huge upset in my opinion, despite the even lowish morning line of 4-1 on All Out Blitz. Quick look at that pace projector. It's a small field, only 5. All the horses are shown. But you can see the nice gap that the 2 Sistron has over the rest of the field. The question is, can he take advantage of it? And we'll get to him in just a minute. Let's start looking at the morning line favorite at 9-5, Dr. Door. Dr. Door made some promising runs last year. He was actually second to Accelerate, the champion older horse of 2018 in the Grade 1 Santa Anita Gold Cup. He showed a speed routing that day before finishing a good but well-beaten second. He pressed a fast pace in the Suburban next out. was up again on the pace in the San Diego. But the difference there is those are all route races, anywhere from 1.116. The other three we shown here at 1.25 miles. In his return race, he actually tried the 7-furlong San Carlos Stakes, and he ran a decent second behind upsetter St. Joe Bay that day. But the key to note is he just doesn't have the same kind of speed sprinting. He was well off the pace. 6 lengths back even after a half mile, almost 7 lengths back. And I think he's going to have a similar dilemma this time. The one thing to note with him is that he is second off the layoff, but he is even turning back even more from that last time. So I think the distance really isn't going to suit him. The second choice I'm especially against is Kanthaka in here. For one, he hasn't run particularly fast in any of his races. He won one of the 7-furlong graded stakes at Santa Anita as a 3-year-old. And he's run okay, but he just hasn't won very often. He needs a good setup to get it, and he's certainly not going to get that in here. He was a distant third in that same race where Dr. Dorr was second, beaten over 4 lengths to St. Joe Bay. And again, another tactical disadvantage for him in this race. And it's even, I think, he does his best running at 7 furlongs, so 6.5 is probably a little bit too short for him as well. So let's take a closer look at Sistron and see what there is. One thing that stood out on the preview page was that his spotlight figure was in green, indicating it's from a turf race. So that's definitely a big question mark when you see that with these kind of horses, if they'll have the same kind of speed. Luckily at Timeform US, we have lifetime past performances, and we can look back throughout them, and we'll see that in just a second. But first, I just want to point out how well this horse has been running. He ran third back in an allowance race with a speed figure that wouldn't compete in here. But since then, he's been in really good form. 3 out of his 4 figures have come in 120 or higher. The one lone exception was in a 4-furlong race or 5-furlong race where he tried to keep her up early. But it's probably just a little bit too short for him. And again, the big question with him is dirt. So scroll back through his past performances, and I saw exactly what I like to see here. Not only has this horse run well on dirt, he's won on it. He actually won the Northern Spur Stakes at Oakland Park on Arkansas Derby Day last year. But he's run well on it in other times. And more important to me is he's run similar speed figures. He ran that 104 in the Northern Spur. He did appear to jump up on turf, but then he bounced back and tried the Los Al Derby, and despite being 5th, beaten 9 lengths, he set the pace in that 2-turn race that day, and he actually got a very similar figure to what was running on turf at the time. So I think he's going to handle dirt just fine. I left the stakes race where he lost to Battle of Midway in there. Little bit intentionally just to show he was well beaten, but I think that was more a case of the track. You can see we had it coded in blue as favoring closers. He was up on the lead, and he was up against also Battle of Midway, who was just a really good horse, former Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner. So my pick is going to be Sistron in here. I'm not going to play around with any exactas. I'll single him in any horizontal bets, and he's my value play, even at probably short odds of 2-1 or 5-2 or so, but I think he's going to be worth it. That does it for me for this week for Out of the Gate, and I'll talk to you again next week.
Are you a horse player looking to raise your game? For over 120 years, expert handicappers have relied on Daily Racing Form as their must-have source for news and data, featuring exclusive buyer speed figures, Timeform US pace figures, and integrated replays. DRF Formulator is the most powerful handicapping tool on the market today. Use what the pros use. Go to drf.com/formulator and enter code DRFTV to get your first card free. drf.com. Raise your game.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Let's throw up the field for race number 10 at Laurel Park on Saturday. It is the $125,000 Federico Tesio Stakes for 3-year-olds going 1 1/8. And this race is usually a springboard for one of the local hopes to enter the Preakness. $125,000 is the purse for expanded stakes previews of many of the major races all weekend long. Visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We have a deserving, overwhelming morning line favorite in Always Mining. We'll get to him in a minute. Let's talk about a horse that Always Mining has owned in the past. That is Tybalt, Matt, who is also cross-entered on the turf at Aqueduct on Saturday. And when you look at his pedigree, we're like, why hasn't he tried turf before?
Yeah, you see the kitten's joy on top. You figure grass is ultimately where he's going to end up being best. But he's done some decent enough things on dirt, and we're going to go and take a look at his run 2 starts back. This is in the one-turn Miracle Wood down at Laurel, and the problem for a horse like Tybalt, I think he's honest. I think he shows up and comes with his effort. In his last 3 races, he's earned buyers of 80, 80, and 81. But you see him being handled by Always Mining here in this spot. Then he came back, tried the private terms, handled by Always Mining again. I just look at it and say, from a win standpoint, I think he's way up against it. But should he run here on Saturday as opposed to Aqueduct, I think he's got a puncher's chance to get a piece of this thing.
Mike, as we saw Always Mining toying with Tybalt in that race, he's been toying with everybody on this circuit since the fall of his 2-year-old campaign. He has won 5 consecutive races. His last 4 Beyer speed figures are better than anyone else in the field has ever earned. He also projects as the lone speed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I don't have a lot to say about this race. Always Mining just towers over this field on form right now. We'll see if he gets the mile and an eighth. We'll see if he can handle, maybe a little more pace pressure this time. I'm not sure if that's even going to happen in here. We're going to take a look at his replay of his most recent start. This is his first time around 2 turns in the private terms. And listen, he had an easy trip on the lead, never faced a challenge, but he wins for fun. I just didn't have any real interest in trying to beat this horse at all.
No, set it and forget it for me. I think he's the best horse in the race. I think he makes the front, and you see him flashing his tail a little bit. Maybe additional ground will get him when he faces better horses, but on Saturday, I just think he's way the horse to beat.
By far, he's the most likely winner. He's also trying a mile and an eighth for the first time, and I wonder if Rudy Rodriguez's horse Majid is going to at least try to push him a little bit in the early stages. That being said, he's probably going to win, but I'll take a stab with the one Bazzini. Trainer Jeremiah Engelhardt does very, very well with horses coming back off weak layoffs, and this horse just ran on April the 13th in a sprint. We'll take a look at it right now, and he was up and close to the pace on the backstretch. He was out-sprinted a little bit on the turn, but I like how he eventually wears down this pace setter in grinding fashion, only to be overhauled late by the horse on the outside, Still Dreaming, a horse that has been handled by Always Mining, admittedly in the past. This horse has won his only 2-turn start to date. This race was at 7 furlongs, so I like him stretching out. I like him wheeling back on short notice, and his pedigree has enough stamina. It's from the family of Pimlico Special winner Golden Missile to make me think he'll get the mile and an eighth. He needs a lot of things to go his way to beat Always Mining, who would be my only A in multiple race wagers, but maybe you can consider Bazzini underneath or as a deep, deep backup. We'll move from Laurel to Keeneland, from dirt to turf, and we'll stretch all the way out to 1.5 miles for the Elkhorn Stakes. Saturday's feature race at Keeneland is the Grade 2 Elkhorn Stakes, going 1.5 miles on the turf. Let's take a peek at this field. For expanded stakes previews, visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We've got previews, race of the day, the Matt Bernier show, and lots more. Trainer Michael Maker has got a big hand in this race. He's got the horse to beat in Zulu Alpha, Matt, but bigger picture is a hard hitter that you can never, ever count out.
He may not be what he once was, but I still think there's reason to believe that one of his best chances or his best efforts is good enough to win in a race like this. We'll go back to the Pan American, his most recent run at Gulfstream. You're going to see him winging out widest right now, about 6 paths off the rail. The problem is, I just don't think he appreciates Gulfstream. He's only run well there 1 time out of the 3 times he's been there since Maker's gotten a hold of him. And I think getting to Keeneland's going to be to his benefit, and I recognize he's 0-for-3 lifetime at Keeneland as well, but he has run well in all 3 of those starts. I think there's a chance with a decent amount of pace in here that you get one of his better efforts.
Mike, Bill Mott has been very patient with Red Knight, and he's been rewarded. The horse showed glimpses of potential last year in New York, but he really put it all together last time out with a super game performance in the 2-mile Alan Jerkins.
Yeah, they went all the way out to 2 miles with him last time. I thought he ran great in that race. He was pretty far back early as a bunch of long shots sort of separated themselves from that field. But overall, I thought the trip was fine for him. He made an early move to contention on the far turn. Then we'll pick up this race in the stretch. He has already taken this race over. He is on the lead here after moving on the far turn. He's going to dig in gamely, hold on to get the win over Solio, another horse who he will be facing again in this spot. Listen, this horse, I'm a big fan of this horse. He can do just about anything on the track. Distances are no problem. He can get any kind of trip in a race, so I don't think he'll be compromised by pace. I think there's a lot to like like about him, and I thought he might be a square price in this race.
My top pick is a long shot to consider, and that's the number 1, Vittori Kin, who has a couple of races on his page to indicate that he can factor in a race like this. Note that he won the Grade 3 Louisville Handicap last year off only a 6-day break, stretching out from 1 1/16 to 1.5 miles. He's now going to run in the Elkhorn off a relatively short break as well, 15 days, stretching out from 1 1/16 to 1.5 miles. Let's look at that race 15 days ago. He's down on the rail, turning for home in last. There really is a difficult trip for him to overcome, and he's going to try to get outside of horses, and he's just going to get stopped, and eventually he'll have to alter course down towards the inside, and he'll finish up evenly. You'll see him get stopped right here, have to alter to the 2 path, and then down towards the rail, and he's running at the end of this race. This was sort of a listed stakes quality allowance at a distance that's way too short for Vittori Kin. Timeform US is projecting a fast pace for this distance. He's 20-1 on the morning line, and I want to give him a shot in an evenly matched race coming off of a short layoff and again stretching out. That pattern has worked out for him in the past. David Aragona of Timeform US. His spotlight segment is on a long shot, double-digit price on his morning line in one of the New York Stallion Stakes at Aqueduct on Saturday, and then we'll be back for best bets.
Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona with this week's Timeform US Spotlight. There are 2 stakes races on Saturday at Aqueduct, a couple of divisions of the New York Stallion Stakes for 3-year-olds going 6 furlongs, New York breds, 1 for the Colts and 1 for the fillies. I'm going to take a look at the female division of this race. It's the Park Avenue division, going as the 8th race on Aqueduct's Saturday card. There are 2 likely favorites in this race, the number 5 Newly Minted and the number 8 Stones in the Road. And speaking of those 2, I think we can begin the discussion of this race by looking at the Timeform US pace projector, because as you see, there is that red bar at the top of the screen indicating a fast pace, and the 2 horses that are likely to be contesting that pace are these 2 favorites, Newly Minted and Stones in the Road. I think there is a bit of a potential that these 2 can knock each other out on the front end, because they both have the same style. They both have needed the lead to run their best races in their prior starts. Newly Minted has just had 1 prior start, but she ran it in gate-to-wire fashion. So I think these 2, you want to be aware that they have the same running style, even though they are the 2 most likely winners of this race based on their form. We'll begin by looking at the number 5 Newly Minted, who ran very well in her debut. The only problem is that debut came just a week ago. 7 days ago she won that race by 5 3/4 lengths. She didn't take a whole lot of money as a first-time starter for Linda Rice, going off at almost 9-1, but she was certainly ready to win first time out. She broke sharply, took the field around the far turn while laying down some legitimate fractions, and she drew off with authority that day. I really liked the way she finished that race. That was a solid field coming in, and she beat them like a drum. I believe she might be the most talented horse in this race. The real question is, can she reproduce the same effort coming back on such short rest? Also, will she participate in this race? Because I know Linda Rice sometimes makes a game day decision about whether or not to run these horses when they are coming back on short rest. If she runs, she's formidable. I just don't totally trust her given the circumstances. Her main rival is the number 8 Stones in the Road, the other speed in this race. I wasn't the biggest fan of this filly in her first 3 starts. Even though she won all those races by large margins, she was very fortunate on a number of those occasions. On February 3rd, she rode a gold rail to victory. On February 23rd, her main speed rival didn't break, and she was allowed to set a relatively slow pace on the front end. And last time out, she was stepping up against Open Company in the Cicada, but she faced adversity for the first time, and she lost. I mean, look, she ran a respectable speed figure. The 100 Timeform US speed figure that she earned for that race is the highest number that she's received in her career, so she deserves credit for still running well. I think the loss that day just kind of removes the air of invincibility around this filly, because she's stepping up into another difficult spot. I mean, Newly Minted is just as talented as any of the Open Company horses that she faced in the Cicada last time, and I'm just not sure that she can duel with that horse, put her away, and fend off the closers going the 6.5 furlongs. I haven't seen enough out of Stones in the Road to think that she can do that, but she is the second most likely winner of this race, assuming the 2 favorites both show up. But these 2 are going to take most of the money. They're going to be very short prices compared to the rest of this field. And there's one other horse in this race that I think is going to offer real value, and that's the number 7 Alphadora. She's a maiden coming into this race, so she's still looking for her first career win, but this horse has run better than it seems in basically all of her races. I liked her debut quite a bit because she was against a track bias that day. She closed well next time out despite coming wide off the far turn and losing ground at the quarter pole. And then last time, I think it's really worth watching that race that she ran on March March 15th. Full disclosure, I actually highlighted this filly's trip in that race in my Horses to Watch segment that I do because I think she really ran quite well around the far turn. She was kind of opening up on the field at a time when there was really no reason to move that early. Hector Diaz seemed to just drop his hands, and she was racing in blinkers for the first time, and she just kind of ran off with him. He didn't make any attempt to restrain her from making that premature move, and by the time they came to the top of the stretch, she had laid down some pretty fast fractions and was leg weary for the final eighth of a mile. I still think she might have won that race if Hector Diaz had kept after her in the final eighth, but he seemed to think he had the race wrapped up. I don't know if he just didn't see the filly sneaking up the inside or what, but he just kind of wrapped her up late, and I think it cost her the victory because Today Comes Once rallied by her. The winner of that race, Today Comes Once, is actually a fine filly in her own right. She came back in a stakes next time out and nearly won that race. Actually might have won without a trip that she got that day. So that race certainly checks out from a quality perspective. She earned a 95 time Formula speed figure for that performance despite all of those problems. And now cutting back to 6.5 furlongs, I think it might be a better distance for her. And that time Formula pace projector predicts that she's going to get a little bit of pace to run into. So I like the distance for her. I think she's going to get a decent trip because she showed in prior races that she can pass horses, and because she's a maiden going out for low profile connections, she's going to be a bit of a price in this race. So I'm taking a shot with Alphadora, hoping we get a price somewhere in the 8-1 to 10-1 range, and I think we'll get somewhere around that, given that the two favorites are likely to attract most of the play. So it's Alphadora for me in the 8th race at Aqueduct on Saturday. Now let's send it back to the studio.
Time for our best bet segment here on Out of the Gate. Mike Beer, it pays to take trip notes. You're going to show us why.
Yeah, Closer Still is off the layoff. Keeneland race 7 on Saturday. It's an allowance race sprinting on the grass. We're going to go back to Saratoga last summer. This is the Coronation Cup. You might as well get right into the replay because there's a little bit to talk about here. Brooks Fine from the gate is going to sort of stay on the inside all the way. One thing to note about this race is the pace is just very slow. They do not go fast. The eventual winner is on the lead right now, and she's just gonna start backing down this pace. Keep an eye on Closer Still as they enter the far turn. She's got nowhere to go, and eventually Luis Saez is just gonna have to take her right up out of this race. From there, she's just lost all position. This race is basically over for her. They pick it up in the stretch. She's still last. She's actually going to make a little bit of a run into this race. And I think she runs deceptively well. Her next start was another stakes race at Belmont. She finished within a length or so of a win there, finishing 3rd. And then she made one more start at the end of last year sprinting on the grass. And they used her speed, and she got hooked up in a wicked duel in a race that went to Closer. She's off the layoff on Saturday with a trainer change that I don't mind at all. And she's 8-1 on the line, and I'm going to bet her.
Matt, you're looking for a little bit of a price perhaps at Gulfstream. With a horse we know, Garter and Ty has kept some good company.
Yeah, he's kept some good company, and to be honest, I think he's been doing something that he doesn't actually want to do. He's running in the Roar down at Gulfstream on Saturday, the 11th race, and he's turning back to a one-turn configuration, which to me is what he's wanted all along. His two most recent runs, the Florida Derby and the Holy Bull, longer against better horses. We're going to look at the run 3 starts back, and I think this was an effort in the Mucho Macho Man, better than maybe it looks at face value. He's going to be in a decent enough position right here, but he gets kind of shuffled a little bit in traffic. Meanwhile, on the outside, Code of Honor and Mijos, they're going to get the first run going up out into the clear, and at this point, Garter and Ty is shuffled to the rear, and right now, rounding the far turn, he doesn't really have anywhere to go either. He eventually is going to finally extricate himself and come on with a decent enough run. To me, this is an instance where this horse is finally going to be allowed to do what he wants to do. It's a one-turn configuration against lesser company, and there's just a part of me that thinks at 4-1 with some other interesting sort of fresh faces. Promo Code's a fresh one for Pletcher in here. You've got a Jason Service runner on the outside. I think he might get every bit of the 4-1, and I really believe Garter and Ty might be a decent one-turn horse going forward.
I'm going to closing day Saturday at Aqueduct. Race number 5, number 4, Candygram, stretching out off 2 sprints for trainer Jimmy Jerkins and Centennial Farm. Let's go back to his last race, 7 furlongs at Gulfstream, a race where he did not get off to a great start. He was far back and wide on the backstretch and into the turn, and these 2 horses that have been on the lead, they ran 1-2 basically all the way around the track. Candygram, one of the few horses making up ground at the end of this race, and I like him stretching out to 1 1/8 on Saturday. I believe that he can control the pace on Saturday. He does have tactical speed, and the one time they tried to go long with him, a 1-turn 1/16 at Belmont last year, he just went right to the front and bottomed them out. And I'm hoping that's what he can do on Saturday. Race number 5, number 4, Candygram is my best bet this weekend. We thank you so much for watching Out of the Gate, and we urge you to follow all of DRF TV's latest offerings, please follow on Twitter at DRF Video. And for the latest news and notes from America's Turf Authority Daily Racing Form, please follow on Twitter at DRF Inside Post. That's it for this week. Best of luck when your horses break out of the gate.